Hello and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. I'm so glad you joined me again today. And we have a very special program today on a topic that we haven't talked about before. So I hope you stay tuned and let all your friends know to join in because I think this will be a very informative subject for everyone. Before I get started, I'd like to give a shout out to our show sponsor, Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. And like I say all the time, if you want to stay healthy, he's the man or the doctor you need to visit, or his center as well. As well, because they really focus on keeping their clients healthy. And I have been their client for many years, and let me tell you the truth, I haven't been sick in many years, so it's working. And I also would like to let you know that my awesome, wonderful co-host, Mary Browning, is not going to be here with us today. She's doing some very important work out of state, and so I'm looking forward to having her back and to her sharing what she's been up to. Our special guest today is a lady I had not met before. She is going to be talking about embryo adoption. And this is something that I am not very familiar with at all, but I know she is an expert in this subject, and I can't wait to introduce her. Her name is Marlene Strege. She's a native of California. She has worked as an occupational therapist in both the medical and educational settings for over 30 years, and she's the first snowflake mother. Marlene and her husband, John, adopted frozen embryos that remained from another family's infertility treatments, and their daughter, Hannah, was born. Marlene is both the birth mother and the adoptive mother of Hannah. Marlene is passionate about promoting embryo adoption. She and her family now reside in Colorado. So, welcome to More to the Story, Marlene.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so glad you joined us because this is something that I don't know much about, but you're the first woman to give birth to a snowflake baby. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and about that story.
So, my husband and I have now been married 40 years, but back in 1996, we were going through infertility treatments. They started out kind of easy, and then they get more and more high tech until they reach the point that they want to do IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. And I was uncomfortable with that, more probably because I thought, what would happen to any remaining embryos that we had?
Mm-hmm.
As the testing continued, the doctors discovered that I had premature ovarian failure, which meant I wasn't producing eggs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So now the solution they told me was to get donor eggs from somebody else and use my husband's sperm. And we were uncomfortable with that because that would be creating a life outside the marriage bond.
Mm-hmm.
So through my tears, I asked the doctor, do you have any embryos we could adopt? And he said, well, yeah, I've got tons of those because nobody's ever asked me that question before. So before we did embryo adoption, what we could have done was a donor program through a fertility doctor where he hands you a list. In fact, one doctor did hand me a list of embryos he had based on the physical characteristics of the person that provided the egg and the sperm, hair color, eye color, all that kind of thing. And I handed it back to him and I said, this is how you choose your car based on options. It's not how we're growing our family. So we contacted a good friend of ours who was executive director of an adoption agency in Southern California. And he talked about his domestic program and his international program. And I said, well, we want to adopt frozen embryos. And I explained the situation, and he immediately understood what we were doing, what we wanted to do. So that's how this ball got rolling. But first and foremost, I wanted to find out what God would think about this. So I contacted some trusted Lutheran pastors. We're Lutheran. But I also contacted Dr. James Dobson, who was then at Focus on the Family, and said, what would God think about this, about adopting frozen embryos? So everybody came back, even Dr. Dobson, and said, yes, if the original family's not going to go back for them, they need to be placed for adoption. So what we did was we completed all the requirements for the state of California for adoption. home study. So FBI background check. We had social work visits to the home, adoption education courses, everything that you would do for any other child. And we couldn't find a doctor who would do the transfer. My doctor wouldn't do it. I think because it was going to be an open adoption where everybody would know who everybody is. You don't get that with the donor program. So Dr. Dobson said, come to Colorado Springs, you need a vacation. So John and I came, and he introduced us to the crisis pregnancy director there. 6 weeks later, they get a phone call from a woman who says, I have 20 frozen embryos I want to place for adoption. And so, as it turned out, we were a perfect match. They chose us, and we chose them, just like a birth mom would choose. And then once the paperwork was signed and they had 3 days to change their mind, those 20 frozen lives were Federal Express to our clinic. We found a doctor in Pasadena, California. And then my body was prepared to receive those embryos. A lot easier than IVF. So it was estrogen and progesterone injections. And then they thawed 12 embryos in order to get 3, because I said I would only do 2 to 3 transferred. And only 3 survived. They had, the doctor said it wasn't a good outlook for those to implant. I did not get pregnant. And then I went again the next month, and I got pregnant with Hannah. So we had no remaining embryos left, and Hannah was born on December 31st, 1998. And she became the first snowflake baby.
Awesome.
And so the only thing different than what we did than a traditional adoption, we do not have an adoption decree from a judge, because my daughter was property. My 20 children, their legal status was property. So we have a birth certificate that shows that my husband and I are the legal parents of my daughter.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So I've got tons of questions here. And I think the first one for me and for our viewers and our listeners is the difference between a donor adoption and a frozen embryo adoption. And I like the way you said it. It looked like when you were given a list of donors, it was like, like you said, trying to pick out the things you want on your car, because I just bought a new car, and are these donor babies already fertilized? Are they already conceived? Are they?
They're frozen embryos. So what happens? Doctors will create more embryos in the lab in IVF than will probably be used by a couple, because they want the ones that look the best and all of that kind of thing, which doesn't matter. We've had babies have been born from embryos that aren't like perfect, and so what happens is a family completes their treatments and has their family, and they cannot parent any more children, just like a birth mom is unable to parent her child. So then they have these frozen embryos remaining that they have to pay a yearly fee on to keep them frozen. And they don't know what to do with them a lot of times. And still, this is like 28 years ago, people still have not heard of embryo adoption. And
so let me see if I get this. So the donors, this is a couple that have gone through IVF. And right. Now, is this a married couple, or are they picking someone else to, fit
all of the above?
Oh, wow.
So it can be a married couple. It can be somebody who uses donor eggs, or someone who uses donor sperm, or they use both, right? Which is not in the best interest of the child, because when these children grow up that have been used with donor egg and donor sperm, they don't know who they can date. Right. Because they're not the only ones that have chosen that person for their sperm or their eggs.
Yeah.
And because of HIPAA, you can't find that information out. You can't find out maybe a little medical information, but certainly not the name. So you don't know, that child will not know when they're older, if they're dating a genetic sibling.
Wow, yeah, that poses a lot of problems.
And a lot of problems for the child.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
our motto has always been, is this in the best interest of the child? So
Yes,
before you do, that's my recommendation. If anybody listening is thinking about IVF, always answer that question. Is this in the best interest of the child? Or is it in your best interest because you want a child?
yes,
And you can't hide these things from the child. You need to be honest with the children.
yes.
And I honestly, right now we have in our country 1.5 to 1.6 million frozen embryos. We have an orphan crisis. So
Hmm.
in my mind, because I'm on this side of it now, I just don't see why people wouldn't do embryo adoption instead of going through IVF. Um,
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know,
Because that's just adding more to the, frozen embryos, more to these unbirthed
exactly,
children and
exactly,
their human lives.
right.
So, have you? I know I've got tons of questions here for you, but have you considered or worked on any kind of legislation that could change that or bring awareness to that?
I would love to. So,
Hmm.
if you or any of your viewers know of anybody, please contact me because I would love to um, uh, see this. You know,
Change
this
legislatively,
yeah,
yeah.
because it's really it's an the IVF industry is unregulated pretty much, so
Wow.
they can do whatever they want, with these children. And really, I think these IVF fertility clinics, they're there for the parents.
Right,
They want to produce a pregnancy for them.
right.
Um, I don't think they really think about what happens to the child if they were used, donor egg, donor sperm. Now, in our situation, because we do have an open adoption, Hannah, our daughter, knows, and we know, we visited with her genetic siblings and her genetic family, also called the placing family, because in our case, they were the genetic family. They did not use donor egg, donor sperm. But one of the kids came to stay with us and told my daughter, oh, if you meet so and so in Colorado, don't date him because we're related to him. I mean, it's just gold, to have that information,
Right.
that
Yeah.
Hannah can have that information, about who she is and where she came from and all that.
Awesome.
So
Oh, I just have so many questions. So, how big is the snowflake family community? I mean, I mentioned someone that I knew who was a snowflake mother, and you knew her.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
is it a tight knit community? How do y'all
Well,
connect?
yeah. So, I was by myself for a long time at the very beginning because the second and third snowflake twins, Hannah was 21 months old when they were born. And so I know what it's like to be alone. And also, um, there are other adoption agencies, and I don't even know how many, I think it's a handful, but other organizations that do embryo adoption. Again, I don't know what the credentials are for those people because, again, you're not dealing with human lives, you're dealing with property. So you don't have to do, I heard of a woman who got her embryos on Facebook because, so,
Yeah, there. I can see. I'm a former legislator, and so I can see the big need for awareness, education on this in the legislative arena, and even some bills filed. So I'll be happy to work with you
well,
if you're
please,
interested
and
in
and I know President Trump as well. I mean, the big push was, for
IVF.
infertility and IVF, but I don't think people know the dark side of the IVF industry.
Yeah, absolutely not. And just like hearts and minds are changed through the power of testimony, through abortion experiences like what Mary and I do. I know the power of testimony, and when you're able to give personal account, personal experiences, and their insight that you've developed through the years, that changes hearts and minds.
Well,
And
we've been involved in this from the very beginning because we were involved with the embryonic stem cell research
mm,
issue. We
mm,
testified before Congress when Hannah was 2. And
okay,
then we went to Washington for a couple years to lobby congressmen and then senators on this issue because we saved Hannah's cord stem cells. So we're not against stem cell research.
Yeah, cord
But we're
stem cells
against
are great. Yes.
but we're against using my daughter for that research.
Right.
So I testified before Congress. The second Snowflake mom testified before Congress. And then we stood behind President Bush for his first veto in 2006. And Hannah and myself and other Snowflake children and their parents were on the stage with him in the East Room of the White House. And he turned to Hannah and the other children and said, "These children are not spare parts. And we're
Wow.
not going to use this funding for that." And to date, there has been zero cures from embryonic stem cell research. It's all coming from your own stem cells and from adult stem cells. So, and then Mary actually helped us and the Justice Foundation with our amicus brief for the Dobbs decision on the viability issue. So, Hannah, you get pictures of your children in the under the microscope in the petri dish before the transfer. And so, the doctor handed me the picture and said, "Here's the first picture for your baby book." Well, I called the embryologist. I said, "Please snap a picture the second transfer, the one with Hannah, the day of thaw. The next day of transfer, I want to see what happens overnight." She had gone to her next stage of development overnight in the petri dish called compaction. And so in our brief, the viability issue in Roe v. Wade is now at fertilization, because Hannah was alive. She was alive when she was created. She was frozen for over 2 years, 9 months. And then she was thawed. And yeah, that was keeping her alive. And then she was thawed and placed into my body. And she was viable. Yeah. And so she only attached to me because she was hungry and she wanted to breathe. So that's what she got from me: oxygen and nutrients and a warm place to grow and love. And same thing she needs outside the womb.
Yes.
So these are human lives, and it's egregious that we have property of human beings in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. It's shocking to me when you mentioned that earlier, that they were property. I mean, and property. They're human beings.
Yeah.
We all started the same way.
Right.
And we're all humans,
I know. Yeah. And one thing, Hannah actually included this in her, in a paper she did in high school, of the zinc spark. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So researchers at the University of Northwestern, you can Google this on YouTube, photographed the moment when the egg and the sperm come together and there is a flash of light.
Okay, I have seen images of it. I didn't remember what it was called. But
yeah, it's a chemical reaction that happens, but there's a flash of light. I mean, to me, that signifies new life.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Endowed and by their creator with a soul. And they should be protected under the Constitution, I believe.
Absolutely. And they're knit together and created, and no matter whether they're knit together in your mother's womb or outside the mother's womb and put in a mother's womb, they're still being created in the image of God.
Right.
And so that's exciting, though. I have seen that picture. So I'm kind of looking through my questions here. And we still have a few minutes. So if you were the one in charge of making decisions, since we were talking about legislation, what would you do with these frozen embryos?
Well, I would make the federal tax credit available to families who adopt frozen embryos as well. And actually, there's a handful of parents who have taken that, but I would make that widely known so that it reduces the cost for families for the adopting side of things. I would, well, they're people.
Yeah.
They need to, I would make sure that embryos are not being destroyed in clinics because they're not good, embryos or however they grade them or rate them. Because I've seen children born from.
That's just
I know.
My mind.
But I've seen embryos that have come to term where they were a poor grade, and you never know. You just don't know which ones, are going to come to term. So they all need to be given their chance at life.
Yeah, they all have the right to life. And I've said this before, that, whether your child lives or not outside the womb after birth, whether it's moments, days, weeks, or months, that life is important.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's for a purpose.
Right.
And they have the right to have the dignity and the love given to them, no
Yeah.
matter how many their days are numbered.
Yeah.
And
And if you think I'm passionate about embryo adoption, Hannah is even fiercely more passionate, because that was her. That was her life.
yeah,
She was property legally at one time, and that just is appalling to her,
I
to
bet.
think that in this country she was property.
Well, she sounds like an amazing young woman, and I know you're very proud of her.
Yes.
And maybe we'll interview her one day and get
Yeah.
her perspective
Yeah.
on it.
I do want to mention too that my husband is a writer. He's a sports writer, and works for Golf Digest. He's authored 8 books, 7 on sports, but he did write Hannah's story.
Mm.
If I
Oh,
can
good.
show it.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
It's A Snowflake Named Hannah: Ethics, Faith,
Uh-huh.
and the First Adoption of a Frozen Embryo. So you can get this on christianbook.com or
There we go.
Amazon. And that is Hannah. That's a picture of Hannah. I think she was like 8 days old or something like that.
Well,
So
I would love to get that book. Yeah, and thank you. And that kind of brings me to another question, um, about, um, how long has frozen embryos been, how long of a process did it take for frozen embryos to be brought to term, or what's the longest one?
what's the longest they've been frozen and
Yeah.
brought to term? Right. So the record had been 30 years, and it was boy and girl twins in Oregon. And that record was just broken this week. I don't know the exact amount. It's under 31 years, but it's over 30 years, so
Wow.
somewhere in there. But this was a little boy that was born,
Wow.
this
Wow.
week.
That's just
So
amazing.
um,
So now I think I lost that question about how long it's been. Um, and I think you mentioned earlier that this frozen embryo process has been around for over 30 years. Is that correct?
no, it's been since 1997. So about
I'm sorry, you cut.
1997. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't know how many years
yeah,
that is, but
like 28 years or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to ask you. So when they create these embryos outside of the womb, I guess, is that how
Right.
they do it?
So the woman
In,
the woman
in
is
the
given
lab?
drugs to stimulate her ovaries so that she will produce multiple eggs. Typically we only do one a month. But again, this is not always good for the woman to have multiple eggs, at one time. And then they put those eggs in a dish and they mix it with the sperm, and then embryos are created. They take the ones that might look the healthiest and transfer those back to the woman, and then they freeze the remaining embryos.
Okay. And how do they? I was curious about twins. I delivered triplets, so I was curious on how do they know they're twins? If you're, I mean, I guess I was just curious. How do they know? Is there
Right.
twins because they put two eggs in you and they're born at the same time, or they created in the lab? Because normally they split once. From what I understand, they'll
Well,
split once
well,
they
that's for
fertilize.
identical twins, and that would happen, I believe, in the mother's womb. And so there have been identical twins born. Um, there's also, if they're, say they did put 3 embryos in me, so I could have been pregnant with 2 babies or 3 babies or more if one of those embryos had split. So there is a snowflake family that they transferred 2 embryos, and they gave birth to 3 children
Oh wow!
because one of those embryos split. So they have identical twins within the triplets.
Oh wow! Wow! Yeah,
So yeah, just a
that's
lot of
really
a lot of
interesting.
a lot of crazy stuff
Yeah,
sometimes, that
yeah,
you
boy,
don't even think about.
yeah. It's hard to wrap
Yeah.
my brain around it sometimes. Well, you mentioned earlier about the difference between IVF and virtual fertilization, and then donor.
Donor
IVF,
embryo
the IVF
donor
process
embryos.
yeah, the IVF process and the embryo transplant process. I've met a young woman who was going through IVF, and it sounded so risky to me. Is there a and then actually I heard an interview on live action the other day with Lila Rose talking about the medical risks that are involved with IVF. Are you familiar with those?
Well, I know with retrieving the eggs, they're stimulating the ovaries and they give you these high powered drugs. And you can have, I believe, what's called ovarian hyperstimulation, which is a risky thing for a woman. Um, and yeah, it's those drugs. I mean, I've been on the infertility drugs, not the IVF drugs. And, you know, it, it was a horrible experience. And so with estrogen and progesterone that I was on, those are hormones that are typically in your body anyway. But
They're
because of
natural.
my diagnosis of premature ovarian failure, I wasn't producing as much of those hormones anymore. So that's why they had to give it to me. And some women do a natural transfer with no medication, particularly if they have male factor. So if the husband is the one with the issue, they have done embryo adoption and just a regular transfer with no medications. So embryo adoption is a lot easier on the woman than and then you're pregnant. So you would be like any other woman who's pregnant, right?
That's
There's nothing.
amazing. Yeah,
You're on, like I was on those hormones until the first trimester, and then I was taken off of them.
wow,
So
because your body was taken over
the
naturally.
placenta kicked in, and yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
yeah.
So we just have a couple minutes left. What would you like to say to our listeners and viewers that would be helpful for them if they were, inclined to do more research into embryo
Yeah.
adoption?
So I would say, first and foremost, pray about it and see where God has your child. Now there's different organizations that do it, and you might you might be strongly led to one organization versus another. If you are contemplating placing your embryos for adoption, make sure that whoever you place your embryos with are not splitting up those embryos right from the get-go.
Mm,
They need to go all together to one family. And then if that family has children from those embryos, but then they can't parent any more children, custody should revert back to the original family, who can then choose another family. If you're and if you're looking at adopting
that's
again,
their children. That's sorry.
what's that?
I said that's their children. They should go back to them.
Well, they should be able to make that decision on who the second adopting family would be, and then it's hopefully all open so everybody knows who everybody is. Really, that's in the best interest of the child. Doesn't mean you have to have a relationship. It just means that everybody knows who everybody is. Again, for those dating issues that come up later.
Right.
And really, really, if you're an adopting family, pray about it and see where God has your child, and then proceed. And God's going to provide. He'll provide the money for you. Just in all kinds of ways. We were provided the money in an amazing way. So I'm sure God will,
Is
honor
it
your decision.
is it an expensive process compared to regular adoption? Or?
Well, yeah, I think it's less than domestic adoption and international adoption. But again, you'd have to check with individual programs to see what their costs are. I don't have them off the top of my head. So
Yeah, and I see where some legislation could be helpful to make it more affordable, so these children could be adopted.
right,
Um,
and we need to do something with the IVF industry to stop this from happening.
yes,
That we have 1.5 million frozen embryos, and there are ways to do IVF ethically. I think I'm not against IVF. I'm for doing it ethically
okay. We'll have to
and in
talk.
the best interest of the child.
Mhm. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that privately and see what we can do. So, how can people get in touch with you, Marlene? I think it's been going across the screen, but I'd like for you to give out your contact information
Sure.
in they have questions for you, or if they would like to invite you on their podcast or
Yeah. You know what? It's right there on the screen. It's nothing fancy. It's my email address. I don't have an organization. It's just me. mtnfresh@aol.com.
So she lives in Colorado, so she's breathing that mountain fresh air. So it's abbreviation for mountain, MTN fresh at AOL.com. That's awesome.
Right.
Well,
Right.
thank
And
you.
you should have my daughter on as well.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah. To send Tracy an email and let her know she does all my scheduling, but I'd love to have her on really soon.
Yeah.
And thank you
Yeah.
for coming on and sharing your heart and your experience and your wisdom and information with us, because I certainly learned a lot today. And I hope our viewers out there will, if you're interested in more information, please get in touch with Marlene. And if you can't get in touch with her, contact us and we'll help you connect the dots there. And so thank you, Marlene, for coming on. Thank you all for listening to More to the Story with Molly White. We look forward to seeing you again next time. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Hello, friend. Our broadcasting wanted to take a moment to personally thank you for being a listener of the More to the Story podcast. Whether you're a longtime subscriber or just found us, we're so glad you're here. This podcast is a community built on sharing, and that's where you come in. If an episode has ever resonated with you, please consider sharing it. Text it to a friend, post it on social media. Your recommendation is the most powerful way to help these important stories reach new ears. We are also inviting businesses and individuals to partner with us as official sponsors. Sponsoring the podcast is a wonderful way to reach a dedicated, thoughtful audience while directly supporting our mission. If you'd like to explore sponsoring the podcast, we invite you to visit our website at www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Again, that's www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Thank you for being a part of our story.